The bluish glow of the laptop screen illuminated Michael Bennett's face as he sat frozen, staring at the images that would forever shatter his perception of reality. His hands trembled, and the coffee long forgotten was cooling on the makeshift desk in the basement office of his home. It was 10 minutes past midnight, and his daughter, Emma, supposedly immobilized by a tragic accident a decade ago, was walking normally down the second-floor hallway. The footage showed every movement clearly and cruelly, first making sure no one was around, then rising from her wheelchair with the grace of someone who had never needed it. Michael watched in deep shock as his 25-year-old daughter, the same one he had carried up and down the stairs every day, danced alone in her room to music he could not hear. 10 years of sacrifices, adaptations, and unwavering dedication crumbled before his eyes. The house he had completely renovated to accommodate her, the job he had given up to become her full-time caregiver, the countless hours of physical therapy he had attended, hoping for progress that never came, everything had been part of an elaborate lie. Michael's first instinct was to rush upstairs, burst into Emma's room and demand answers. Rage bubbled up in his chest like lava, threatening to spill over. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way Emma moved in the video, not with the joy of someone who was deceiving, but with the caution of someone carrying an invisible weight. There was something in her gestures that spoke of fear, of a self-imposed imprisonment more restrictive than any physical paralysis. Michael shut the laptop and sank back into the chair, his mind a whirlwind of memories and questions. He remembered the day of the accident when the hospital phone call made his world stop spinning. Emma had only been 15 when the car she was in with friends flipped on the way back from a party. While the others walked away with scratches, she was trapped in the wreckage for hours. The doctors spoke of spinal trauma, possible permanent paralysis, and a long recovery. The weight of that night was still etched in his memory. The antiseptic smell of the hospital, the monotonous sound of the heart monitors, the paralyzing fear as he waited for news. Michael remembered holding Emma's cold hand in the ICU, promising that he would never abandon her, that they would face any challenge that came together. At the time, he thought the battle would be against physical limitations. Now he realized the real enemy was far more complex and invisible. But now, as he replayed each moment from that time in his mind, Michael began to notice the small signs he had ignored. The way Emma insisted on doing her own hygiene, even in the early days after the accident. Her resistance to new doctors and second opinions. The panic she showed when experimental treatments or exploratory surgeries were suggested. Tears began to fall silently. They were not just tears of anger or sadness, but of a deep confusion that hurt his soul. As a father, his natural instinct had always been to protect Emma, to fight for her, to do everything within his power to ensure her well-being. Now, he was realizing that perhaps his greatest failure had been not understanding that she needed a different kind of protection. In the days following the discovery, Michael kept up his normal routine, but each interaction with Emma took on new meaning. He watched how she behaved differently when she thought she was alone, how her eyes carried an old sadness when she believed no one was watching. He began to notice the small moments of hesitation before she asked for help, the almost imperceptible tremor in her hands when someone mentioned her condition. The daily routine became an exercise in self-control. Every morning as he helped her with breakfast, Michael fought the urge to confront her. He saw how she manipulated the silverware with a precision that should have been impossible for someone with her supposed limitations. He noticed how she unconsciously adjusted herself in the chair, a movement that revealed a muscular control she pretended not to have. One particularly difficult morning, Michael found Emma crying silently in her room. His first instinct was to enter and confront her, but instead he remained in the hallway listening to her muffled sobs. It was then that he heard her whisper to herself, "I can't lose this. I can't lose them. Not again." Those words hit Michael like a punch to the stomach. For the first time, he began to consider that Emma's lie wasn't about deception or manipulation, it was about fear. A fear so deep and rooted that it kept her trapped in a wheelchair more effectively than any physical injury ever could. The nights became a torment of reflections and decisions left unmade. Michael spent hours sifting through old photographs, gazing at Emma's face before the accident, a vibrant teenager, full of dreams and confidence. He compared them to the later photos, now noticing something that had always been there, a haunted look, a shadow of guilt that he had never truly understood. One photograph in particular caught his attention. Emma at 14, just a few months before the accident, smiling openly during a trip to the park. Her eyes sparkled with pure, carefree joy, which now seemed like it belonged to another life. The contrast with her current gaze was painful. What had happened to transform that radiant girl into the young woman now trapped in a lie? During the day he continued his caregiving routine, but each gesture now carried a different weight. When he helped her transfer from the wheelchair to the car, he could feel her body tense, resisting the natural impulse to move on her own. At family gatherings, he watched how she withdrew when someone commented on her strength in dealing with her disability, how her smile wavered for a fraction of a second before she composed herself. One afternoon, while sorting through some old documents, Michael found the hospital diary from the time of the accident. Among the medical notes and prescriptions, there was something he had overlooked before: an observation from a psychologist about possible severe psychological trauma and tendency toward evasive behavior. At the time, everyone had been so focused on her physical recovery that these notes were relegated to the background. The discovery made him question everything he thought he knew about that fateful night. What really happened in that car? What did Emma see or experience that led her to build this elaborate prison for herself? The physical paralysis may have been temporary, but something that night had paralyzed her in a much deeper, more lasting way. Michael began researching psychological trauma and its effects, how the mind can create extreme defense mechanisms to cope with traumatic experiences. Each new piece of information helped him better understand Emma's behavior, but it also deepened his anguish about how to proceed. The truth was, even after the discovery, Michael remained the father he had always been, someone who would put his daughter's happiness and well-being above all else. But now he faced the most complex dilemma of his life. How could he help someone who had built a fortress of lies to protect herself? How could he break down the walls without destroying the person hiding within? As the days turned into weeks, Michael began to develop a new plan, not one of confrontation but of understanding. He decided that, before taking any action, he needed to fully understand what had led his daughter to choose this path. Not out of anger or a desire for revenge, but out of love. A love that now needed to manifest in a much more subtle and patient way than he had ever imagined. As he watched Emma sleep that night, Michael made a silent promise to himself and to her. He would find a way to help her break free, not just from the wheelchair, but from the fears and traumas that kept her imprisoned. It would be a long and delicate journey, but he was determined to walk it, not just as a caregiver, but as a father who was finally beginning to understand that some wounds require far more than bandages to heal. The full moon poured its silver light through the window of Emma's room, casting soft shadows that danced on the walls. Michael remained there in silence, watching his daughter's sleeping face. In that moment of stillness, he made his final decision. His love for her would be greater than the lie that separated them. He would find a way through this labyrinth of secrets and pain, no matter how long it took. The dawn arrived with a light rain, the kind of morning that made Michael think about how life could change so drastically while the world continued its unbothered course. Sitting at the kitchen table, he prepared breakfast as he had done every day for the past 10 years, but today every gesture carried the weight of his discovery. Emma appeared at the kitchen door in her wheelchair, her brown hair tied in a messy ponytail, soft dark circles marking her young face. "Good morning, Dad," she murmured, her voice still hoarse from sleep. Michael felt his heart tighten as he noticed how she subtly adjusted her posture in the chair, a movement so slight that it would have gone unnoticed before. "Good morning, sweetheart," he replied, placing a cup of coffee with milk in front of her. His fingers brushed lightly against hers during the motion, and he realized how she perfectly controlled the tremor she used to pretend to have. It was surreal how small details he had once interpreted as signs of her condition now revealed themselves to be part of an elaborate performance. As they drank their coffee, Michael dove into his memories, going back to the period right after the accident. Emma had spent only 3 weeks in the hospital, an unusually short time for someone with a supposedly severe injury. At the time, doctors had attributed her quick discharge to the lack of complications, but now he wondered if there was something more. "I was thinking we could organize some old photos today," Michael suggested casually, watching Emma's reaction closely. "I found a few boxes in the basement we haven't seen in years." Emma's fork stopped halfway to her mouth, a nearly imperceptible hesitation. "I don't know, Dad. I have that video call with the support group today." Michael knew there was no call. The cameras he had installed had revealed that Emma spent those supposed online meetings alone in her room, sometimes crying quietly, other times just staring out the window with a distant look. "We can do it later then," he conceded, noticing how her shoulders relaxed slightly. It was fascinating and painful to watch how every interaction between them had now become a complex dance of truths and lies. Later that day, while Emma was supposedly attending her online meeting, Michael decided to investigate further. In the attic, among dusty boxes, he found a photo album he hadn't seen in years. The images told the story of a different Emma, a lively teenager, always surrounded by friends, especially her best friend, Claire. Claire. The name triggered a sudden memory. She had been in the car the night of the accident, but after that, she never appeared again. At the time, Michael assumed it was because of the trauma from the accident, perhaps guilt, but now he wondered if there was more to the story. Flipping through the album, one photo in particular caught his attention. It was from Emma's last birthday party before the accident, her 15th. In the picture, Emma and Claire were hugging, identical smiles on their young faces, a shared secret apparent in their knowing glances. On the back of the photo, a partially faded inscription, "Forever together, no matter what happens." The sound of wheels on the floor made him quickly put the album away. Emma appeared at the attic door, her hands nervously gripping the rims of the chair. "Dad? What are you doing up here?" "Just organizing some things," he replied, noticing how her eyes quickly scanned the room, pausing for a moment on the partially visible album behind him. "Wanna help?" I can't. You know it's hard for me to sit on the floor for too long," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. It was an excuse she often used, and Michael realized how she had built an entire system of justifications over the years. That night, after Emma went to bed, Michael began searching for Claire on social media. It wasn't difficult to find her. She lived in another city now, worked as a teacher. Her profile showed a young, smiling woman, but there was something in her eyes that reminded him of the same weight he saw in Emma's. Impulsively, Michael sent a message, "Hi Claire, this is Michael Bennett, Emma's father. I know it's been a long time, but we need to talk about what happened that night." The reply came almost instantly, "I knew this day would come. I'll be in town tomorrow. Meet me at the cafe on the corner of the hospital at 10 a.m. Michael barely slept that night. His mind was filled with theories and possibilities. What did Claire know? Why did she seem to have been waiting for this contact? And more importantly, what was the real event that had transformed his joyful and lively daughter into someone who chose to live a lie for 10 long years? The next morning, after helping Emma with her breakfast and making sure she was comfortable with her favorite book, Michael drove to the cafe. The place was almost empty when he arrived, just a few hospital staff grabbing coffee after their night shift. Claire arrived on time and Michael almost didn't recognize her. The smiling teenager from the photos had turned into a serious woman, her eyes carrying the weight of old secrets. She sat down in front of him without ceremony, her hands intertwined on the table, trembling slightly. "You found out, didn't you?" she asked without preamble. "You found out that she can walk?" Michael nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it came out hoarse. "Why?" Claire closed her eyes for a moment as if gathering courage. "It's not my story to tell, Mr. Bennett. But I can tell you that what happened that night, it wasn't just a car accident. Emma carries a weight that neither of us were prepared to deal with when we were 15. "What do you mean?" Michael leaned forward, his coffee cup forgotten between them. "Emma was always the strong one, you know? The one who took care of everyone, the one with all the answers," Claire began, her words carefully chosen. But that night something broke inside of her. It wasn't her spine like everyone thought. It was something deeper. A chill ran down Michael's spine. "What happened in the car, Claire?" "It wasn't in the car," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was before. At the party. Emma saw something that changed everything. The accident was just the result of that. She chose the wheelchair because it was easier than facing the truth." Claire's words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Michael felt his world spin again, just like that first night when he saw Emma walking on the cameras. Each new revelation seemed to open more questions than answers. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked, his voice betraying his anguish. Claire finally looked directly into his eyes, unshed tears shining in hers. "Because I promised her. And because I also carry my part of the guilt in this story. We all do." When Michael returned home that afternoon, he found Emma in the backyard garden, her wheelchair positioned near the rose bushes she loved so much. For a moment, he stood watching her from a distance, noticing how she moved with natural grace when she thought she was alone. The weight of Claire's words still echoed in his mind, along with the growing certainty that the path to helping his daughter would be far more complex than he had imagined. It wasn't just a matter of confronting a lie, it was about uncovering a deeply buried trauma that had shaped a decade of their lives. As he walked toward her, Michael made a new silent promise. He would find a way to help Emma face her demons, but he would do so with the same love and patience he had shown during all these years of care. because now he understood that his daughter didn't just need physical healing, she needed healing for her soul. The conversation with Claire had left Michael uneasy. In the solitude of his office, he held an old, crumpled photograph he had found at the bottom of a drawer. A picture of Emma at 15, smiling next to a group of friends in front of a beach house. It was the last photo taken before the accident, capturing a moment of happiness that now seemed like it belonged to another life. His eyes fixed on a detail he had never noticed before. In the corner of the photo, partially hidden, was a young man watching the group. His name surfaced in Michael's memory like a distant whisper: Thomas Anderson, the son of the owner of the house where the party had taken place that fateful night. Michael vaguely remembered hearing that name during the investigation into the accident, but at the time he had been so focused on Emma's condition that he hadn't paid much attention to the peripheral details. Now, every fragment of information took on new significance. Determined to piece the puzzle together, Michael began to sift through the files he had kept from the accident. Among medical reports and insurance documents, he found a yellowed newspaper clipping. The headline was about the accident, but one particular paragraph caught his attention. Thomas Anderson, 18, son of the owner of the residence where the party occurred, gave a statement to the police about the events of that night, but no direct link to the accident was found. The next day, Emma had a routine appointment with her physical therapist, Amanda. After 10 years, Amanda had become more than just a healthcare professional. She was a confidant, someone Emma seemed to trust completely. Michael decided to arrive early at the clinic to speak with her privately. "Amanda, I need to ask you something," Michael began after making sure they were alone. "All these years you've never noticed anything unusual about Emma's physical condition?" Amanda remained silent for a long moment, her eyes revealing an internal conflict. "Michael," she finally said, her voice soft, "as a professional, I'm obligated to maintain medical confidentiality. But as someone who deeply cares about Emma, I can tell you that some wounds aren't physical. Sometimes, emotional trauma can be more paralyzing than any physical injury." Amanda's enigmatic response only heightened his suspicions. Before he could press further, Emma arrived for her session, and Michael had to save his questions for another time. During the session, Michael watched closely as Emma interacted with Amanda. There was a silent language between them, an understanding that went beyond the therapist-patient relationship. At one point, Emma began to cry during an apparently simple exercise, and Amanda simply held her hand, saying nothing. That night, unable to sleep, Michael decided to do something he had avoided for years: watch the video of Emma's testimony about the accident. The recording was kept in a box at the back of the closet, along with other documents he preferred to forget. In the video, a 15-year-old Emma, still in the hospital, answered the investigators' questions in a monotone voice, almost mechanical. "I don't remember much," she repeated. It was dark, the car slid, but her eyes told a different story. There was fear there, and something more that Michael couldn't quite decipher. Determined to understand what had happened that night, Michael began searching for Thomas Anderson on social media. It wasn't hard to find him. He was now a successful businessman in another city. His photos showed a confident-looking man, but there was something in his smile that seemed forced, artificial. Michael made a list of events from that night, trying to organize the facts. The party was at the Andersons' beach house. Emma went with Claire and 2 other friends. Something happened at the party before the accident. The accident occurred on the way back home. Thomas Anderson gave a statement but was deemed irrelevant to the case. As he organized the information, Michael heard a noise coming from Emma's room. Through the slightly open door, he saw his daughter sitting on the edge of the bed, staring intently at a small box he had never seen before. Emma took something from the box, it appeared to be a folded piece of paper, and began to cry quietly. Michael's paternal instinct screamed at him to enter the room and comfort his daughter, but he knew this wasn't the right moment. Instead, he remained in the shadows, his heart breaking as he watched Emma's silent suffering. The next morning, Michael received an unexpected message from Claire. "I found some things you need to see. They're from the day of the party. I didn't show you before because I promised her, but I can't carry this weight alone anymore." They arranged to meet at a quiet park, far from the curious eyes of the city. Claire arrived carrying an old shoebox, her hands trembling slightly as she held it. "Before I show you this," Claire began, her voice low and tense, "I need you to understand something." Emma didn't choose the wheelchair out of malice or manipulation. She chose it because it was the only place where she felt safe. Where no one could hurt her again. Michael felt his heart tighten. "Hurt her? What are you talking about, Claire?" Claire opened the box and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside were photos from the party, ordinary pictures of teenagers having fun. But as she flipped through the photos, Michael began to notice a disturbing pattern. In several of them, Thomas Anderson appeared in the background, always watching Emma with an unsettling intensity. Thomas was obsessed with her, Claire explained, her voice trembling. At first we thought it was just a teenage crush, but it got more intense, more frightening. That night at the party Claire stopped, tears streaming down her face. She pulled out one more photo from the box. It was partially torn and showed Emma running toward the car, her face a mask of terror. He wanted, Claire couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Michael understood the unspoken horror in her words. The accident wasn't an accident, Claire continued after a moment. We were running from him. Emma was driving, desperate to escape. When the car rolled over, for a moment we thought it was better that way. Better than. Michael felt a wave of nausea as he realized the true extent of his daughter's trauma. The wheelchair wasn't just a lie, it was a shield, a fortress Emma had built to protect herself from a world that had proved too brutal for a 15-year-old girl. Why didn't anyone tell me? He asked, his voice choked. Emma made us promise, Claire answered softly. The Anderson family was powerful, influential. Thomas threatened to destroy our families if we said anything. And Emma? She'd rather carry that weight alone than risk hurting anyone else. Michael looked at the photos spread out between them, each one telling a piece of the story his daughter had kept hidden for so long. Now he understood why Emma had chosen to live a lie, because the truth was too painful to live. That night, when he returned home, Michael found Emma in the garden, as she always did at the end of the afternoon. The sunset light painted soft shadows on her face, and for the first time, he clearly saw the extraordinary strength his daughter carried. Not the physical strength she pretended not to have, but the inner strength that had kept her standing all these years, even when the world thought she couldn't get back up. He sat beside her in silence, letting the moment speak for itself. Emma turned to him, and in her eyes, there was a glimmer of recognition. She knew that he knew. But instead of fear or shame, there was relief in her gaze. "Father," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "I'm so sorry." Michael gently took her hand. "No, sweetheart. I'm the one who's sorry. I'm sorry you carried this alone for so long." The unspoken words between them weighed more than a decade of secrets, but there was also a new lightness, one that comes when we finally share our heaviest burdens. Dawn brought a different light to the Bennett house. Michael woke up early as he always did, but something had changed. The weight of unspoken secrets had transformed into a new kind of silence, not suffocating anymore but full of possibilities. In the kitchen, while preparing breakfast, Michael heard a sound that made his heart stop for a moment. Soft footsteps descending the stairs. Emma was walking. When she appeared in the kitchen doorway, standing, her hands trembled for real this time, not from the rehearsed lie, but from the true fear of facing this moment. "Dad?" Her voice was barely a whisper, tears glistening in her eyes. Michael dropped the spoon he was holding and crossed the kitchen in 3 long steps, pulling Emma into an embrace that should have happened 10 years ago. She collapsed into his arms, deep sobs shaking her body as decades of repressed pain finally found release. "It's okay, my little one," he murmured into her hair. "I'm here. I've always been here." They sat at the kitchen table, steaming cups of coffee between them, and for the first time in 10 years, there were no barriers, no lies. Emma began to speak, her voice gaining strength as the words flowed. "That night at the party?" she began, her hands gripping the cup as if seeking strength. "Thomas wasn't just the son of the homeowner. He was someone everyone admired, respected. No one saw what he really was." Michael listened as Emma described how Thomas had stalked her for months, sending messages, showing up at places she frequented, making veiled threats when she rejected him. At the party, he cornered her in a dark room, his intentions clear in his glazed eyes. "Claire saved me," Emma continued, her voice trembling. "She heard my muffled screams and managed to get me out of there. But Thomas, he was furious. He started shouting that he'd destroy our lives, that no one would believe us against him. The desperate escape, the crash, all of it took on a new meaning. The car rollover wasn't just a tragic accident. It was the moment Emma saw an escape. At the hospital, when the doctors talked about possible paralysis, she saw an opportunity to disappear, to become invisible to the world that had betrayed her so deeply. "The wheelchair became my protection," she explained, silent tears streaming down her face. "No one looks twice at a girl in a wheelchair. No one sees her as a threat, as a target. It was safer this way." Michael felt his heart break as he fully grasped the sacrifice his daughter had made. For 10 years, she had trapped herself in a lie to protect herself from a world that hadn't protected her when it should have. But the price was so high, Emma continued, her voice breaking. Seeing you give up your life for me, dedicating every moment to taking care of someone who was lying. That guilt consumed me every day. Emma, Michael took her hands across the table, don't you understand? I didn't abandon my life, you are my life. If I could choose again, I would do everything the same. The only thing that hurts me is knowing that you carried this weight alone for so long. That afternoon they did something they hadn't done in years. They went for a walk in the park together. Emma was still nervous in public, her steps hesitant after so much time pretending she couldn't take them, but Michael was by her side, his arms strong, offering support when she needed it. People who knew them stopped, surprised, some trying to mask their curiosity, others asking direct questions. Emma faced each encounter with a strength that surprised even herself, simply responding that she was in a process of healing, a truth that went far beyond the physical. At home, Emma asked to see the old hospital tapes. Together they watched the moment when at 15 she began her elaborate lie. Michael noticed something he had never seen before, the exact moment when the fear in her eyes shifted into determination, the instant she decided to create her own prison to protect herself. You were so young, he whispered, his heart aching for the girl who had to make such difficult decisions so early. I was terrified, Emma admitted. But somehow, even in that awful moment, I knew you'd be by my side. You've always been, Dad, even when I didn't deserve it. That night, sitting on the porch, watching the stars like they used to when Emma was little, she shared more of her journey. She talked about the nights she cried alone, the constant fear of being discovered, and the guilt that consumed her every time she saw her father's sacrifice. You know what's most ironic? She said, a sad smile on her lips. The wheelchair that was supposed to protect me ended up becoming another prison. But somehow you turned that prison into a place of love, Dad. Your dedication, your care, you made me feel truly safe for the first time since that night. Michael understood then that his decade of care had not been in vain. Even though it was based on a lie, his dedication had created a safe space where Emma could, slowly, begin to heal. What do we do now? Emma asked, her voice small in the darkness. Now, Michael replied, taking her hand, we start again. Together. No lies, no fear. One step at a time. Emma squeezed her father's hand, and in that simple moment, there was a silent promise, of healing, of truth, of a new beginning. The crescent moon shone above them, a silent witness to a love that had survived lies, trauma, and secrets, emerging even stronger on the other side. The healing journey would be long, both of them knew that. There would be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt and fear. But now they had something they hadn't had before, the complete truth about each other and the certainty that they would face every challenge together, no longer separated by unspoken secrets. On the morning of the first therapy session, autumn painted the trees in golden and red hues, as if nature itself reflected the transformation that was to come. Emma spent long minutes in front of the mirror, nervously adjusting the light blue blouse she had chosen. Her first normal outfit after so much time wearing clothes selected to complement her supposed condition. Michael found her still in the room, his fingers trembling as he tried to fasten a button. Their eyes met through the reflection in the mirror, father and daughter, both carrying the weight of a decade of secrets that were only just beginning to unravel. The chair? Emma began, her voice faltering. Stay, Michael finished softly. If you want to. Emma shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. No. No more lies. Dr. Rachel Martinez's office was a warm space, with soft-toned walls and a large window that let in natural light. Emma sat on the couch, her hands tightly clasped together, her knuckles turning white. Michael sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance, still unsure of how to navigate this new reality. Start from the beginning, Emma, Dr. Rachel suggested in a gentle voice. Tell your father what you've never been able to say before. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them again, there was a new determination in her gaze. The first lie was the easiest, she began, her voice almost a whisper. When the doctors talked about the possibility of paralysis, I saw an escape. It was as if the universe was offering me the perfect hiding place. Michael listened, feeling each word like a small blade to his heart. Emma described how she had built her self-imposed prison, piece by piece, lie by lie. How she had learned to control every muscle in her body to pretend weakness, how she studied the symptoms she should present, how she turned her fear into a performance so convincing that even she sometimes forgot it was an illusion. The hardest part, she continued, her voice trembling, was watching you give up everything for me. Every dream you abandoned, every sacrifice you made, it was like dying a little every day. The session continued, painful revelations surfacing like bubbles in waters that had long been still. Emma spoke of the nights she cried silently in her room, how she watched her father sleep in the armchair next to her bed in the early months after the accident, about the guilt that consumed her every time he smiled, proud of each small progress she pretended to make. At home, the changes began to show. The wheelchair was taken down to the basement, but not before Emma spent several minutes just staring at it, her hands gently caressing the metal arms that had been both her prison and her refuge. "It saved me," Emma said softly as Michael watched her. "But it also destroyed me." The days that followed brought unexpected challenges. Emma discovered that after so long pretending limitations, her body had developed its own movement patterns. She had to relearn how to walk naturally, how to move without thinking, how to exist without constantly monitoring every gesture. One afternoon, while organizing Emma's room, they found an old box under the bed. Inside it, a journal she had kept since the accident, its pages yellowed with time and stained with old tears. "Do you want to read it?" she offered, her voice trembling. "I think it's time for you to meet the real Emma." Michael sat next to her on the bed, the journal between them like a bridge over a chasm of 10 years of silence. The words were raw, honest, devastating. Emma wrote about the fear that never left her, about how she monitored Thomas on social media, terrified that he might discover the truth. March 12, 2015, Michael read aloud, his voice faltering. "Today Dad turned down a promotion to stay with me. He smiled and said I'm more important than any job, but I saw the sadness in his eyes. I wish I could tell the truth, but the fear is stronger. What if Thomas finds out? What if Dad hates me when he knows?" Emma cried silently as he read. The following pages revealed a deep loneliness, a self-imposed isolation that went far beyond the wheelchair. She wrote about watching old friends moving on with their lives, about abandoned dreams, about the constant fear of being discovered. "There's more," she said softly, turning a few pages. "This one's from last year. September 20th, she read, her voice trembling. "Today I saw Dad looking at old work photos of yours. He thinks he was alone, but I saw him crying. 10 years have passed and he still puts my life above his. How can I keep living this lie? But how can I stop? The truth won't just destroy me, it will destroy him too. What kind of daughter am I, building my entire life on a lie?" Michael took her hands in his, feeling them tremble. "You're my daughter," he said firmly. "Nothing will change that. Not lies, not fear, not the past." The therapy sessions continued twice a week. Emma began to talk about Thomas, about the night of the party, about the terror that consumed her. Michael listened, his heart torn between the anger at the man who caused so much damage and the pain of not having realized his daughter's true suffering. "I wanted to be invisible," Emma explained during one particularly difficult session. "The wheelchair gave me that. No one looks twice at someone in a wheelchair, not in the way I feared being looked at." Dr. Rachel guided them through the healing process, helping father and daughter rebuild their relationship on new foundations of honesty and understanding. Emma began to take small steps toward independence, literally and figuratively. One night, after a particularly intense session, Emma found Michael in the garden. It was a clear night, the stars shining brightly in the dark sky. "Dad," she said softly, "I found some apartments for rent near the university." Michael felt his heart tighten. "You want to move?" "I want to start living," she replied, her voice stronger than he had heard it in years. "I can't keep being the scared girl who needs to hide. You taught me to be strong even without knowing it. Now I need to learn how to use that strength." She paused, looking at the stars. "And there's one more thing. I want to press charges against Thomas." Michael turned to her, surprised. Emma continued, "Not for me, or not just for me, but for other girls who might be going through the same thing. I can't let fear control me anymore." That night, father and daughter stayed in the garden until late, planning for the future. Emma talked about her desire to study psychology, to help others trapped in their own invisible prisons. Michael shared his own long-held dreams, possibilities that could now be explored. The wheelchair remained in the basement, covered by a white sheet. It was no longer a prison or a shield, it had transformed into a reminder. A reminder that sometimes we need to lose ourselves to find ourselves, that fear can paralyze us more effectively than any physical limitation, and that true love survives even the deepest lies. Emma knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still many fears to face, many truths to be told, many battles to be fought. But now she had something she didn't have before, not just the strength to confront her demons, but the certainty that she didn't have to face them alone. Emma's decision to press charges against Thomas triggered a storm of emotions that neither she nor Michael were fully prepared to face. On an autumn morning, as the golden leaves danced outside the window, father and daughter prepared to take the first step toward justice. The police station was an imposing red brick building, and Emma felt her legs weaken as she climbed the stairs to the entrance. Michael held her hand, offering the silent support she needed most in that moment. "It doesn't have to be today," he whispered. Emma tightened her grip on his hand. "Yes, it does, Dad. I've hidden for too long." The room of Detective Jennifer Morris was smaller than Emma had imagined, with light walls adorned with diplomas and family photographs. The detective, a middle-aged woman with kind yet determined eyes, listened to her story with respectful attention. "I know it's been a long time," Emma began, her voice trembling slightly. "But every single day of those 10 years is etched in my memory as if it were yesterday." As Emma recounted the events of that fateful night, Michael learned details he hadn't known. How Thomas had started stalking her months before the party, sending threatening messages when she rejected him. How he had friends in influential positions who helped him track her movements. How fear had turned into absolute terror on the night of the party. "He cornered me in his father's office," Emma continued, her hands trembling over the glass of water the detective had offered. "He said no one would believe me. That his father owned half the town, that he could destroy not just my life, but my whole family's." Jennifer took meticulous notes, her face maintaining a professional expression, but her eyes revealed understanding and compassion. "And that's when you decided to use the accident as an escape?" Emma nodded, silent tears streaming down her face. "The wheelchair, it became my shield. Who would look twice at a paralyzed girl? Who would see her as a threat?" Michael felt his heart tighten. For the first time, he fully understood the extent of the terror his daughter had lived through. As a father, he'd always wanted to protect her, but now he realized there had been a whole world of pain he hadn't seen. After the police station, Emma asked to go to the park where she used to play as a child. They sat on a weathered wooden bench, watching children play on the swings and slides. "You know what's the strangest thing, Dad?" she said softly. "For so long I thought the lie was my prison. But now I realize it was also my excuse for not living." Michael looked at his daughter, noticing how she seemed different. Lighter, somehow, as though sharing her burden had begun to set her free. "Claire called me last night," Emma continued. "She wasn't the only one, Dad. Thomas, he did this to other girls. Some of them reached out to her after they found out I was pressing charges." The revelation hit like a heavy weight between them. Michael felt a mix of anger and sorrow as he thought about how many other lives had been affected by the same man who had stolen 10 years of his daughter's life. In the weeks that followed, the Bennett family underwent a profound transformation. Emma began attending a support group for survivors of trauma, where she found other women who understood her journey. Each shared story was a small step toward healing. One afternoon, as they were cleaning out Emma's old room to turn it into an office, she was determined to start her new life in her own apartment. They found a box of old photos from the party. Emma stopped when she saw one in particular, she and Claire smiling, unaware of what the night would hold. "We were so young," she murmured, running her fingers over the photograph. "So innocent." Michael sat down beside her on the floor. "You can still be happy, Emma. Different, stronger, but happy." Emma leaned her head on her father's shoulder. "You know what scares me the most? It's not him anymore. It's the idea of living without fear. It's like I've forgotten how to do that." The investigation against Thomas was progressing slowly. Other victims began to come forward, each with their own story of terror and silence. Emma found that her courage had inspired others to find their own voices. One night, after a particularly difficult session with Dr. Rachel, Emma made an unexpected request. "I want to go back to the beach house," she said. "Where it all happened." Michael felt his heart stop for a moment. "Are you sure?" "No," Emma admitted with a small, sad smile. "But I think I need to do it. I need to prove to myself that place doesn't have power over me anymore." The beach house was different from what Emma remembered. Smaller, somehow less threatening. The windows were dusty and the paint was peeling from the walls. The Anderson family had moved away years ago, leaving the property abandoned. Emma walked slowly through the garden, her steps steady on the tall grass. Michael followed closely, ready to support her if needed, but respecting her space. In the office where Thomas had cornered her, Emma stopped. The sunlight filtered through the dirty windows, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. "I used to dream about this place," she said softly. "But now looking at it, it's just a room. An empty room in an empty house." At that moment, something shifted in Emma. It was as if the last chains holding her to the past began to loosen. She turned to her father, tears in her eyes, but a true smile on her lips. "Let's go, Dad. There's nothing left for me here." On the way back, Emma spoke about her plans for the future. About the psychology college she would start next semester. About the small apartment she had found near campus. About her desire to help others find their voice. Michael listened, his heart overflowing with pride and love. His daughter was finally emerging from the shadow of fear, no longer hiding, but facing the world with courage and determination. When they got home, they found Claire waiting on the porch. She was holding a thick envelope in her hands. "These are all the pieces of evidence I kept," she said, handing the envelope to Emma. "Messages, photos, everything. Other girls have also sent their stories. You're not alone in this fight anymore." Emma hugged her friend, their tears mixing. It was a moment of deep connection, mutual understanding, and shared healing. Later, alone in her room, Emma wrote one last entry in her journal. "Today I realized that the real prison was never the wheelchair or even the lie. It was the fear I carried inside of me. But now I know I am stronger than my fear. And I'm no longer alone on this journey. Every step I take is a reminder that I survived, that I'm still here, that I can choose my own path." The scared girl who hid for 10 years is finally learning to fly. Emma's small apartment near the university was bathed in the golden light of the morning sun. Unpacked boxes still piled up in the corners, each one containing fragments of her old life, ready to be reorganized into her new beginning. Michael stood in the doorway of the room, watching his daughter arrange books on the new shelf, a welcome gift he had specially chosen for her. "I still can't believe I'm really doing this," Emma said, her fingers brushing the spine of a psychology book. Her first semester in college would start in a week, and the mix of anxiety and expectation in her voice was palpable. Michael smiled, his heart overflowing with pride and a bittersweet pang of anticipatory longing. "You're ready for this, sweetheart. You've always been." The case against Thomas was ongoing. 5 more women had come forward with similar stories, each carrying their own scars, each finding strength in the courage of the others. Emma had become a sort of bridge for them, a beacon of hope showing that it was possible to emerge from the shadows. "I got a message from Sarah today," Emma commented, referring to the youngest of Thomas's victims. "She finally told her parents. She said my story gave her the courage to do it." Michael approached, helping her organize the last of the books. "You turned your pain into purpose, Emma. That's extraordinary." A support group had formed naturally among the women, with weekly meetings where they shared not only their stories of trauma but also their small daily victories. Emma talked about how each meeting made her feel less alone, less different. Claire was also blossoming. After years of carrying the weight of Emma's secret, she was finally free to be not just a silent guardian, but a true friend again. Her constant presence during Emma's move into the new apartment was proof of this renewed connection. "Do you remember that day in the park?" Emma asked softly, sitting on the new bed. "When you told me that I could still be happy?" Michael nodded, sitting down beside her. "That day I didn't believe you," she continued. "It seemed impossible. How could someone who had lived so long in a lie ever find true happiness? But now?" She paused, looking out the window where the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. "Now I understand that truth isn't just about exposing secrets. It's about allowing yourself to be who you really are." Emma's transformation in the past few months had been extraordinary. It wasn't just the fact that she was walking again, but how she carried herself, with a newfound dignity, a strength that came not from the need to hide, but from the courage to show up. Dr. Rachel had noticed this change too. In their last joint session, she commented on how the father-daughter relationship had evolved from one of protector and protected to a true partnership, based on mutual understanding and respect. "You know what else surprises me?" Emma said, getting up to open one of the still-sealed boxes. "How fear can make us create such elaborate prisons. But also how love can give us the strength to break those very same prisons." She pulled something from the box. It was her old journal, the one she had shared with Michael weeks ago. Next to it, a new notebook, its cover still shiny and untouched. "I started a new one," she explained. "Not to hide secrets this time, but to document my journey. So one day maybe I can show other people that it's possible to start over." Michael felt tears welling in his eyes. His little Emma, who had spent so long living in the shadows, was now not only walking in the light but helping others find their own way out of the darkness. The sound of footsteps in the hallway announced Claire's arrival, carrying bags of Chinese takeout, a tradition they had established during therapy sessions and which would now mark this new phase. The apartment is looking amazing," Claire exclaimed, placing the bags on the small kitchen table. Her smile was genuine, her eyes sparkling with a joy that reflected Emma's. As they set the table for dinner, Michael watched the two friends chatting and laughing. It was a sound he had almost forgotten. The sound of youth, carefree joy, of life being lived rather than merely survived. Emma picked up her chopsticks confidently, a simple gesture that she would have once avoided, fearing it would betray her supposed trembling hands. Now, every movement she made was natural, free, true. "A toast," Claire proposed, raising her glass of soda. "To truth, to courage, and to new beginnings. And to family," Emma added, looking at her father with teary eyes. "Not just the one we're given by blood, but the one we choose and build through love and understanding." Later, when Claire had already left and the last boxes were empty, Michael was preparing to leave. It was the moment he had dreaded, the moment he had to leave Emma alone in her new home, taking that final step toward her independence. "Dad," Emma called as he stood at the door. "Thank you for not giving up on me. Not even when I had given up on myself." Michael hugged his daughter, feeling how much stronger she was, not just physically but in spirit. "I'll always be here, sweetheart. Just a few blocks away." Emma smiled through her tears. "I know. And that's why I can finally fly, because I know I have a safe place to land." Michael drove home that night with a full heart. The wheelchair was still in the basement of his house, covered by a white sheet. Not a symbol of imprisonment anymore, but a reminder that sometimes we need to lose ourselves completely to truly find ourselves. The future still held challenges. The lawsuit would follow its course, there would be difficult days ahead, moments of doubt and fear. But now there was also hope, not the fragile hope of one who hides, but the robust hope of one who has found their truth and chosen to live it fully. Emma was ready to write her own destiny, no longer as a victim or a survivor, but as a strong woman who turned her pain into purpose. And Michael would be there, no longer as a protector, but as a pillar of support, watching with pride as his daughter finally spread her wings to fly. The story of Emma and Michael reminds us that true love has the power to heal even the deepest wounds. Sometimes our greatest fears become our greatest opportunities for growth, and our most painful lies can pave the way for the most liberating truths. If this story touched your heart, share your own journey of overcoming in the comments. We all have stories of courage inside us, waiting to inspire others. Join our community on the Life Stories channel, a space where real stories of love, courage, and transformation find a voice. Your like and subscription help us continue sharing narratives that remind us of the power of truth, forgiveness, and the strength of unconditional love. See you in the next story, with more journeys that make us believe in the power of human connection and the beauty of new beginnings.